We've been following the story in Minnesota closely, from the tragic death of Renee Nicole Good, shot and killed by a federal ICE agent during a massive enforcement push in Minneapolis, to the massive fraud allegations across the state. These incidents are part of a much bigger crisis, one that has turned Minnesota into ground zero in a fight between state and federal power. At the core of this escalating conflict are serious allegations involving Minnesota's social services system, programs meant to help the most vulnerable. Federal prosecutors estimate as much as $9 billion may have been stolen from the state welfare and social services programs. That includes food assistance, housing support, Medicaid services, and more. This wasn't uncovered overnight. The situation exploded into the public view after a viral video by YouTuber Nick Shirley, which alleged suspicious funding tied to Minnesota's childcare centers. That video pushed the issue into the national spotlight almost instantly. The response was swift. The federal government froze $10 million in childcare subsidy funding to 5 Democratic-led states, including Minnesota, a move that immediately intensified tensions between state and federal leaders. From there, the federal response escalated rapidly, especially under President Donald Trump's administration. The Department of Health and Human Services and the Treasury Department launched aggressive audits, imposed stricter reporting requirements, and suspended funding in an effort to further stop the misuse of taxpayer dollars. And then Congress stepped in. The House Oversight Committee held a hearing focused on Minnesota's fraud crisis. State leaders and witnesses testified, and lawmakers laid out what they described as repeated failures in oversight, auditing, and enforcement. The hearing turned tense. Lawmakers argued openly, talked over one another, and clashed over whether Minnesota's officials ignored warning signs from the programs that they were running.
I'm not off the rails, please.
You are totally off the rails.
Nancy, enough with your tropes. Give me my time back.
Order, Mr. Chairman.
If Republicans were serious about reclaiming
somebody who attempted to serve me. You fired me and my constituents. You have no time left. You don't get to accuse me of things at this chamber.
You're out of time. You're out of time.
G's have failed. But anyway.
You all have failed.
No,
you all continue to fail. We've done nothing. You've had the gavel, Mr. Comer. We barely do hearings on anything that actually affects change. You have power here, and yet you don't do anything.
But the hearing made one thing clear. Washington believes this investigation is far from over. But the Trump administration didn't stop with audits and hearings. The Department of Homeland Security launched Operation Metro Surge, deploying thousands of federal agents across the Twin Cities and throughout Minnesota. Federal law enforcement says hundreds of arrests have already been made, targeting undocumented individuals accused of serious crimes, including fraud, drug trafficking, and child abuse. That expanded federal presence triggered immediate backlash. Protests erupted, tensions climbed, and then came the moment that put Minnesota back in the national headlines. During an immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis, Renee Nicole Good was fatally shot by a federal agent. Federal officials say that Officer Jonathan Ross fired at Good after her SUV moved toward him and others, alleging that she was using her vehicle as a weapon, leading the officer to act in self-defense. Ross reportedly suffered internal bleeding after he was hit by Good's Honda Pilot. As we reported earlier, that shooting became a turning point.
I want to reiterate first with all of you the facts of what happened today. At 10:25 a.m. Central Time, Immigration and Customs Enforcement were carrying out lawful operations here in Minneapolis. Because of the adverse weather that Minneapolis has seen in recent snow, one of the vehicles became stuck and ensnared in the snow. Law enforcement were attempting to push out this vehicle, and when a mob of agitators that were harassing them all day began blocking them in, shouting at them, and impeding law enforcement operations. ICE officers and agents approached the vehicle of the individual in question, who was blocking the officers in with her vehicle, and she had been stalking and impeding their work all throughout the day. ICE agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands. She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted to run a law enforcement officer over. This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism.
What we are seeing right now is not normal immigration enforcement. We are not asking ICE not to do ICE things. We are asking this federal government to stop the unconstitutional conduct that is invading our streets each and every day.
The fallout was immediate. Minnesota and the Twin Cities of Minneapolis filed multiple lawsuits against the federal government, attempting to block immigration enforcement and arguing that the operation was unlawful and politically motivated. And now, the political consequences are impossible to ignore. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, facing mounting criticism over how his administration handled the fraud crisis, announced he will not seek a third term.
In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor. And I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race. But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year.
Walz has defended the state's efforts to combat fraud, but he also accused federal leaders of politicizing the issue.
Very, very difficult for Minnesotans to think in any way this is going to be fair when Kristi Noem was judge, jury, and basically executioner. It feels now that Minnesota has been taken out of the investigation. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. And I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiably false.
President Trump sees it very differently. He has publicly accused Minnesota officials of turning the state into a, quote, hub of fraudulent money laundering activity, using those claims to justify his federal crackdown. Inside the Justice Department, the pressure has been intense. Several senior prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division resigned, following intense disputes over whether to investigate the ICE officer involved in Good's death, and a push to examine the actions of Good's widow. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche later said that the Justice Department found no basis to open a criminal investigation into the shooting. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem previously labeled the incident domestic terrorism, while Vice President J.D. Vance described the officer's actions as self-defense.
The simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers.
And then came another major decision. Secretary Noem announced that DHS is ending temporary protected status for Somalis, a move that adds yet another layer of tension in Minnesota. TBS has allowed thousands of Somali nationals to live and work legally in the U.S. due to the instability in Somalia. Minnesota is home to one of the largest Somali populations in the country, and critics warn that the timing of this decision could further destabilize communities already under intense scrutiny. What's happening in Minnesota is no longer just about fraud. It's become a real-time test of how far the federal government will go to enforce the law and protect taxpayer dollars, even when state leaders push back. And it raises fundamental questions for the country. Where does oversight end and overreach begin? The outcome of Minnesota won't just shape the state's future, it may define how state and federal power collide in America.